Welcome back to another episode of the Inside Japan podcast, which is sponsored by Jobs in Japan, the best place on the internet to find your next job in Japan. Today, I'm talking with Kasia, who is the founder of Ikigai Connections and Nihongo Jobs, and she helps bilingual and bicultural people find work. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Kasia.
Thank you, Charlie. This is very exciting.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, currently I'm based in the US and I have a job board for Japanese jobs in the US. So anybody who is either a native Japanese person or a non-native Japanese person, but knows some Japanese, they can look at my job board and see what opportunities there are in the US. So it's right now it's still kind of growing. I'm in my third year and it's just still kind of a lot of talking to employers and convincing them of the benefits of these what I'm calling kakehashi employees. And I'm just really excited to be doing this.
That's awesome. Do you find that people who come back to the US after living in Japan, or people in the US who speak Japanese, are there a lot of opportunities for people in the United States to do that?
Absolutely. I think that like currently on my job board, I have a little over 1,000 job ads. So there's definitely companies that are looking for people, but I'm finding that I need to help educate both the employers as well as these job seekers on how to better promote them, because I think that a lot of employers don't really know what to do with somebody who's spent time overseas. So I find a lot especially with JET returnees who've lived in Japan for 3 to 5 years, or people who taught English in Japan. And again, I'm focusing on the US right now as I'm speaking, but I'm sure a lot of my comments could apply to other countries as well. But I find that a lot of people who leave Japan after many years, they come back to the US, they kind of don't know where to look. So that's why I also created this, so that I could help them become like a one-stop shop to find out.
I see. So what are the kinds of jobs that people generally tend to get when they're leaving Japan that actually involve some of their experience or maybe their Japanese language ability when they do get back to the United States?
Well, I'm finding that I think administrative roles are probably the ones that are the easiest to get involved in a Japanese company, because those are the ones where they can use, as soon as they arrive in the US, they'll be able to use their skills that they used in Japan, especially the cultural aspect, knowing how to conduct yourself in Japan, knowing how to, the whole politeness and saying the key phrases. Even if your Japanese levels aren't, superbly amazing, you'll at least know the arigatou gozaimashita and gochisousama deshita, and like just the key phrases, so that if you do want to expand upon your language and cultural skills at a company, I believe that the best way to get in is through an admin role. But there's really a lot of other roles that you can take. There's definitely sales roles and engineering, and there's lots of CPA and legal, and there's an abundance of them. It just depends on your level as well. And one thing that I often talk about is that a lot of the employers may not understand what like the JLPT language levels stand for. So you have to kind of explain that. So I often talk to people who return to the US to say that you have to sell yourself. So I try to help them with that.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because you'd think if it's a company that maybe uses some Japanese in the company, that they would know what the JLPT is. But I guess companies in America who maybe deal with Japanese companies but haven't necessarily been in Japan very much, or haven't got that many people in there who have lived in Japan, might not know about that. Whereas it's something that we probably figure out in the first year in Japan if you've actually lived here.
Oh, yes, great point. And I can talk about this one forever, so you'll have to stop me. But to summarize, I think that because the JLPT is only available in the United States once a year in December. So it was canceled last year in 2020 because of the pandemic. This year, I think it sold, there are less locations and it sold out within, I don't even know, days, hours. And so people aren't having as many opportunities to take the JLPT. And some people are actually flying to other states to take it, which is just astounding to me. But a lot of the employers, they may hear of the JLPT or Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken in Japanese, but they may not necessarily, if they do know about it, they may not be familiar with the levels and what it requires to take the test. And sometimes there's also HR representatives in Japanese companies who may have never heard about it, or they may not be familiar with what it's like to live in Japan or in a foreign country, and to what it takes to, not necessarily, you can't speak English all the time, depending on where you live in Japan, right? Sometimes you have to learn the language. So they may not be familiar with that experience. And I often talk about other tests as well to gain familiarity among my followers and companies, but it's still, I think a lot of companies are still using things like you must be fluent to work at this company, but what does
Mm.
fluent really mean? So that's something that I try to tell job seekers that they should clarify a little bit in their cover letters or in their interviews and say, hey, I can do this and I'm able to do this. And maybe I don't know your exact terminology because you are in the, I don't know, semiconductor industry. And I've never worked with semiconductors, but I have the basic skills in Japanese to be able to learn those on the job. So just give me an opportunity. So those are the kind of things that I'm trying to empower job seekers with.
Right. And I think people who actually can speak Japanese reasonably well, it's it's incredible how many opportunities that you'll find overseas, more so than you'd think, because I have a
Yes.
friend who actually moved back to the United States a few years ago, and he speaks Japanese really well. He's got the JLPT N1, which is the highest level, and
Yeah.
he said but he also speaks Chinese to a really high level as well. I think he's from a Chinese family, so he came to
Nice.
Japan. He speaks Chinese, Japanese, and English to a very high level, and he said he never gets many people like asking him about his Chinese level, even though of course America does a
Oh,
lot of business with China. But the thing is, there are so many Chinese immigrants in the United States, or Chinese first generation or second generation, who can speak both Chinese and English perfectly, but the number of people who can speak Japanese is really low. So he was getting offers for like really great salaries, like $60,000 and up, like for almost everything, for all of these
nice.
kinds of jobs, where he was just like, this is amazing. Just because I can speak Japanese, there's so many opportunities in the United States.
Yes, and it also can depend a lot on your background. So if you have like another degree in something,
Mhm.
there are some candidates, like I know with maybe it's mechanical engineering and other kinds of engineering, that those candidates will be swiped up really quickly by employers because they have this other skill set that they can use to promote themselves. But I believe firmly, and I often talk about this in my webinars, that if you know another language, the doors open up so much more because you become this rarer commodity, and it's hard for you to understand that, especially if you're a job seeker and you're frustrated and you can't find it and you're looking everywhere.
Mhm.
But it's um it's just one of those things that maybe employers aren't necessarily looking for, or they just don't know how much they need you. So
Mhm.
I think knowing another language, especially Japanese, and if you know three languages, holy smokes, that's a huge potential right there. But
Mhm.
you just need to be able to have the skills to kind of look for these opportunities and apply for them and convince the
Right.
employer.
So, what about people who maybe haven't learned Japanese all that well? Like they maybe lived in Japan as did the ALT job or JET program or something for 5 years or even 10 years. How do they go about explaining their time as a teacher when they get back home in a way that might actually help them to get hired?
Oh, great question. And I'm going to explain it in a slightly different way. I'm going to give you two kinds of job roles that are needed here in the US, and then explain how these people can build on these and promote themselves in their resumes and cover letter. So, one role is you're here in the United States and you need to help with travel support, for example. So, there's frequent travel to Japan, and a lot of times let's say Americans that go there may not necessarily have knowledge of what it's like to buy a ticket at at a train station, or how to travel domestically, what to wear, where do they go, what airport do they fly into. So that kind of stuff is something that if you are living in Japan, you might be a little familiar with that, and you might be able to share your cultural skills, even if it's not superbly, language focused. Another role is there's a lot of expatriates coming from Japan to the United States. And typically, like I'm in the automotive industry, Michigan is huge with that. So manufacturing in the United States in general is huge. So
Mm.
a lot of states have, these huge plants and manufacturing facilities from Japan. They also have expats coming here. So somebody has to help these expats find a home in the US. Somebody has to help them get their social security cards and set up their gas and their electricity. So that kind of expat support is also another role that I often see. So if you are an ALT in Japan, for example, and maybe your Japanese is, you maybe haven't really been interested in focusing on the language aspect, you like to get by because your people skills are great, well, then that's a great way to promote how, you're able to communicate with Japanese people, even though your Japanese language skills aren't amazing, because you're a communicator and you understand where they're coming from. You understand their culture. You understand, how to live in a foreign country. So like you're able to relate with people in such a way that is a great soft skill to have. So
Mm.
your time and teaching English in Japan, for example, your customers are Japanese people. You're serving them. So focus on that customer service aspect, understanding their culture and being able to help them out in a foreign country if you
Mm.
do come back to the US or another country like that. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I have a friend of mine who lived in Canada, and she told me that when I think her Japanese is pretty good, but usually she's helping Japanese students who are traveling to the United States or living in the United
Yes.
States for study. And what she found was that because she understood where those people were coming from and she understood Japanese culture, she could help them when there were issues. And there were a lot of issues that, maybe someone living in the US their whole life and didn't understand Japan wouldn't realize. Like,
Yes.
Japanese people actually often struggle when they leave Japan to understand local culture, or they get in
Yes.
a lot of trouble with things like leaving their bags on tables, thinking that that means, oh, this is my table, and they get their bags stolen or something like that. So these kinds of things, she can really help these students who maybe they have like some issues that they wouldn't know would be issues when they left Japan.
Absolutely. I mean, the ALTs and anybody else who's been in Japan, again, regardless of their language ability, you know what it's like to live in a foreign country. You know the loneliness, the confusion, the stress that you have. I mean, if you can just relate to what you experienced in the beginning of your Japan journey and you're
Mm,
able to help somebody else with that, I mean, that is not only is that a great like opportunity to use those skills, but what a great thing to do to help somebody else. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah. It's hard for me to remember that now because I've been in Japan for 9 years. So I'm trying to
Nice.
remember, what was it like when I first got here. I remember just being like wowed by everything, and then
Yes.
like confused by everything. That's what I
Yes.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what your experience in Japan was like, because I we talked about it before, that you lived in Japan for 8 years. Is that right?
That's correct. And
Yeah.
it
What was
was
your
split
experience
up.
like?
Oh, it was just amazing. I mean, I first went in high school for 4 months, which was extremely, extremely confusing because I didn't know anything about Japan. It was the first time I was eating, like agedashi tofu and like just trying these things that were just so strange to me. And that opened up my eyes. When I came back, I was a different person. And I thought I have to go back to Japan again. So 4 months, that was 4 months in Shiga. Then I spent a year in Kyoto in my
Mhm.
junior year of college, which
Wow.
was amazing to see the real like Kyoto that you're just walking around. My school was right by the Heian Jingu and this one zoo, so I could
Oh,
just like
wow.
walk there, and you're just surrounded by history. So that was to me another like, oh my goodness, this is it. I have to be in this country. Then I went back home. Actually, I was at Boston University, graduated thinking, what am I going to do next? And I was deciding between the JET program and the MEXT scholarship, the Mombuka Gakusho
Oh,
scholarship.
right.
I applied for MEXT. I fortunately got it, and they put me into Tokyo. And I said, no, 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 I don't want to go to Tokyo. But I went to Tokyo and I fell in love with it. And I spent 6 years there. So that included some a 6 month Japanese intensive language program, a year of research, and 2 years of graduate school. And then I got into the music industry where I was helping promote concerts in Japan.
Oh,
So
wow.
I still think about my time in Japan as I grew the most as a person because I was constantly reminded that I was reminded that my way isn't necessarily the right way, that there's other ways of doing things. And
Mhm.
it was at work and at school, and I was faced with all these people from different countries and cultures. And I realized that this world is pretty darn big and there's so
Mm.
much we can learn. And I was just amazed at, I was just more interested in just learning more about the world and people. So it was a very enjoyable experience.
Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying the conversation, and I just want to take a quick moment to mention that this podcast is only possible because of the support of JobsinJapan.com. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com. There are tons of jobs on there, not only in English teaching, but also software engineering, hospitality, marketing and consulting, among many others. Most of the jobs on the board do not require any specific level of Japanese, and you can get started in minutes. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com, and let's get back to the conversation.
I think a lot of people don't know about the MEXT scholarships. So yeah, I know someone who came to Japan on an Ikebana scholarship, and
Wow.
and that kind of thing. I don't know how people find out about that. How did you find out about the MEXT scholarship, and what did you come here to for for your scholarship?
So it's typically offered at your local consulate. So
Mhm.
I applied to my local consulate, and they have, so if anybody's interested in going to like study in a higher learning education, whether it's for a part of your master's program or higher degree, when I did it, it was quite a long time ago, and I was able to get assistance with a master's degree program. I think now it's a little bit more limited, but basically you are placed in university and you focus on research and things like that. So if anybody's interested, you go to your local consulate, you look at to see when the applications are, and it's a very intense application process. So I would highly recommend getting familiar with the application, regardless of when the deadline is, and to really like look into the details. You have to have a contact in Japan to kind of help sponsor you. So it's a little difficult to get now, but back when I was doing it, they kind of placed me with an advisor. So I think things have changed now, but it's definitely a great opportunity. And that's where my head exploded with so much language learning. It was fun.
Yeah. And I wonder because of your connection to Japan, one of the things that because your business is called Ikigai Connections, that word has kind of blown up in the last few years. A lot of people have been talking about it, and I remember I think I posted something on our Jobs in Japan Facebook page, and it was one of the most popular posts we ever did, which was about where Ikigai kind of connects is like it's where work, your passion, what you find flow in, so what you're good at, and what something to do with your spirit, something that actually reaches your like maybe your purpose, where all of these things kind of collide in the middle. And it was incredibly popular, I think, just because people are really enthused by this topic. So for those who haven't heard of that word before, can you explain what it means, and then why is that term really an important part of your work?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you for asking. I think that Ikigai is kind of like a buzzword, especially overseas now, and people talk about it as your purpose. And those 4 circles that you were talking about, they're actually not created in Japan. They're not from a Japanese person. It's more westernized version and explanation of Ikigai, which is something that I learned over time, because I was like, who drew these circles? I want to figure this out. And there is a story, and right now I'm blanking on the actual person's name, but it was not a Japanese person. It was just a way to explain it in a nicer way. And I've read all the things about Ikigai. I tried in Japanese as well. My understanding, and on my website, I clarify it as like your purpose, your passion. But from my understanding of what it means in Japanese is that it doesn't necessarily have to connect with your career. It's just something that really is a part of you that makes you happy. And in my business, I talk about the career Ikigai. So I tell people, you don't have to connect. You don't have to love what you do, but wouldn't life be so much easier and better and happier if you did? So if you have a passion for fixing things, and or science or health or anything, and if you have a passion for that, and if you can find a way to make it a part of your career, and if you want to use Nihongo with that, which is for most of us who study Japanese, it's kind of like our Ikigai in a sense, because we just love it so much. If you put that together, I think that's a fantastic way to, live, because you're working for so many hours of your, living day. So that's kind of how I explain it in general, but it's been huge over here, at least in the United States, showing up in like TEDx talks and that. And it's just, I think it's very interesting. It was also made famous by the author Dan Buettner, who wrote the Blue Zones. So the places in the world where people live the longest. One of them was Okinawa, where they talk about Ikigai being one of the reasons that they're living so long. So it's kind of popularized there. But I believe that, yes, if you want to enjoy your career, I think you should be able to, but also remember that it's not going to take like a day to get there. You're going to spend many, many years sometimes, and it's not going to be the easiest journey. But if it's something that you'd like to have as like a mokugyo or a goal, then it's definitely possible.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I remember going to Okinawa, and I definitely felt the difference in pace there, because I live in Tokyo, and I know what when you said that you were being put in Tokyo, you're like, no, I don't want to live in Tokyo. And I know what you mean by that. Like there are a lot of opportunities here, but the pace of life here is sometimes like screeching. It's like so fast, so much is
Yeah.
happening all the time, and you really have to like move to keep up. And then I think it was actually this year during Golden Week, I went to Okinawa
Mm.
for just a week to relax, because we can't travel outside of Japan, or we can a little bit easier now, but
Mm.
there's you have to take 10 days quarantine or 11 days
Mhm.
quarantine when you're coming back. So I thought, okay, well, I just want to take a quick trip, so I went to Okinawa because you can still travel domestically. And
Nice.
it was very different. It was almost like I think the people there just have a much slower pace, and I think they're happier for it, because I just went
Mm.
there, and I went for dinner with some random people that I met there, and it was a 4-hour dinner, and I was just like,
Nice.
in Tokyo that never happens. In Tokyo, your dinner is done in 30 minutes, and maybe you have beers for an hour or two, and then you've all got to go home or catch the last train because you've got work tomorrow, right? Whereas these guys were just like, it was 12 o'clock, and I'm within walking distance of my hotel, and I'm just like, okay, well, and they're like, let's go karaoke, and I'm like, what? And they knew a place, and everyone was super kind and really friendly and open.
Mm.
Even during COVID, even I think the people just have that way about them. And I remember swimming in the ocean with this I met this like 75, 80-year-old guy who was out there every morning just like swimming in the ocean. I was just like, wow, that's like, what a life, really. Like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that just hearing that story kind of just calmed me down, because I'm also, one of those go-getter type people. I wake up and I'm just going to seize the day. But it is just so important sometimes to just relax. Something I'm learning every single day is just to stop and think, hey, let's take a few breaths. Let's just journal. Let's think about what we want to do, and kind of like get to know ourselves, because we're
Right.
so inundated with all these external, like social media and advertising, TV. There's so many things coming at us. But when it, like, a lot of people ask me, how do I figure out my career ikigai? And I'm just like, let's get quiet for a second. Like, what kind of
Mm,
lights you up? What do you appreciate doing? What do you do that you're doing for, you end up doing it for like 3 hours, but you think it's only been 30 minutes? Like, what do you like to focus on that makes you really happy? Let's focus on that. And if you can't figure that out, what makes you kind of feel like, ugh, I don't want to do this, and it takes,
mm,
5 minutes lasts like an hour? So those things, you want to try to eliminate those and not focus on them. So it's like a life journey that I think, when you talked about going to Okinawa and just like appreciating the fine things in life, I think
mm.
that is part of a tie into this too. So
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, I was during the pandemic, I was reading Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor.
oh
And one of the things
yes.
that he talks about, I'm trying to remember the detail. I mean, he's talking about just watching the sunset from
Mm.
the concentration camp, and just really just thinking like, wow, what a beautiful sunset, and just leaving yourself a little bit behind, leaving your
Mm.
circumstances in your life. I have so much respect for the guy, like I really do. And
Man's Search for Meaning, is that
Man's Search for Meaning, yes,
okay?
that's right, the name of the book. And I think that's one of the things I think that people maybe move a little bit too fast to realize,
Mhm.
especially when they're working in, and I, there's a lot of stereotypes about working in Japan. I think 90% of foreigners don't work anywhere near as hard as their Japanese counterparts, and basically do what they would do a 40-hour work week as they would in America, or in the United Kingdom, where I'm from. But um, I definitely feel like we do need to slow down. And I think maybe the pandemic, if there's anything that's
Yes.
happened during the pandemic, it's that people have realized like, well, I couldn't work 100% of the time during the pandemic. I couldn't, like, because of lockdown, because of working at home, the amount of time that I was spending working, dropped a lot. And I realized, like, I actually just really like reading books, and
Yeah.
it was really nice sometimes to just take 4 hours and just like plow through half a book, and just like, whoa, like I really actually felt that, rather than like being on the bus on the way to work going like, okay, quickly read as much as you possibly can because you haven't got that much time. I think it's a really different experience of it.
Oh yeah. This pandemic, I know it's been extremely stressful and awful for some people, but,
Mhm.
and I don't want to say let's try to look at the bright side of things, but it has forced us to kind of slow down, like you said.
Mhm.
So that could be a good thing too.
Hmm. Okay, so one more question I really want to ask you is
Yes.
for people who are living in Japan now, because I think about a third
Mm,
of our audience is people living in Japan. What
nice.
can they do right now and in the future to prepare themselves if they, if they're not planning on living in Japan forever, which I think is probably most people. A lot of people come to Japan, they want to experience Japan, but then they do want to go back home afterwards. What can those
Mm,
people do to prepare themselves for success once they leave? Because I've been doing that myself. I got out of teaching and I've gone into marketing, and I've
mhm.
started a YouTube channel, and I've done a whole bunch of other stuff, so that I can have some skills, so that when I leave
Yes.
Japan, if I choose to leave Japan, I'm ready. I can do other jobs. I'm in demand. But even without Japanese skills, like, what are some things that people can do to prepare for life after Japan?
Great question. I will answer that with three main things. And the first one is do your research. So before you move, think about where it is that you want to live. Maybe let's focus on the geographic part first. And if you want to move to California, for example, well, then do your research on California, see what's Japan related over there. And there's a lot. There's Japan America societies, there's consulates. Get on these mailing lists, figure out the companies that are there, and just start paying attention to these companies, maybe on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. Start following them and just start learning about them, because a little reading every day will help you to get a better idea, A, what kind of companies you may be interested in, and B, what kind of companies they are. Do you find that what they're doing is interesting? Do you like their mission statement? Do they align with your values? Things like that. I think that's helpful and important. So get on these mailing lists, figure it out, and just have it in the background, like whether it's 6 months from now or a year from now or 2 months from now, just kind of like do your research. That's the first thing I would recommend. The second one is I think it's very helpful, and I know this is difficult, but right now everything's online. So let's focus on getting some certifications. So polish up some skills that you have and get some certification that can prove that you know coding or this or that, so that it better prepares you to give you like something for your resume to show whether it doesn't necessarily have to be a degree or like such a long-term commitment, but definitely invest in yourself and focus on something that you would like to use in this future career. So if you are into social media, get some social media certifications. There's plenty of companies that offer this. Show that you're this expert.
Mhm.
And lastly, I will talk about networking. This is my favorite topic. I'm actually doing, by the time this airs, this will probably already have been the US Japan Bridging Foundation. I'm helping them with their webinar series, talking specifically about networking. This is the tool that will help you in your entire career. I think it's completely understated. I don't think people understand how important this is. I think it freaks people out. So
Mm.
networking can be scary, but think of it as not necessarily an like, hey, I need to get a job. Let's find somebody and talk to them right now. It needs to be something you're constantly doing, has to be very organic, whether it's online in LinkedIn or social media profiles, or it's in person, which hopefully that will happen more and more. There's online events, you can do that too, but just start meeting people, share what
Mm.
you want to do, talk about, hey, yeah, I'm in Japan right now. Eventually, a year from now, I'd like to go to the United States. I want to go to Michigan and join the automotive industry. And like once you start talking about this, people naturally want to help others. And I
Mm.
find that, especially because I'm most active on LinkedIn, I find people doing this all the time. Just talk about what you're thinking of, and you'll see that people want to help you. So I just think it's very important to do that. And if it freaks you out, then I'm sorry, got to get over that. You have to do
Mm.
this. You have to connect with other people, especially if you want to work and have careers and work at companies. And it's just a part of life, I think. So
Right.
kind of bridge that gap in your brain and just say, I'm going to like this. Hypnotize yourself if you have to. Like, it's just very important.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's something that I think people have a mindset block about sometimes. That they think when they think of networking, they think of going to like conferences, like mandatory things that they
Yes.
have to go to, and they don't want to, and they've got to like make some connections and hand out their business cards and things like that.
Yeah,
And really, I don't think it's like that at all. Like, really, for me, I mean, what we're doing right now is kind of networking. Like, we
exactly.
reached out, we talked on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what you're doing, you're interested in what I'm doing. We have a discussion, and now I know someone who is in connecting job seekers in America. So if I was ever going to America and I thought, okay, well, I've got some Japanese experience, I can speak Japanese reasonably well, maybe I should reach out and get some info on a job lead or something like that. Like those things, and it's not like something where I'm just using you for your knowledge. It's like, well, we've made a good connection, it's like
Yes.
it's nice and we can chat and I think that it shouldn't be something that people feel is something mandatory that they have to do,
Yes.
but rather just just know people, just get to know people, talk to people, make connections with people, and then you'll have friends all over the world. It's an amazing thing.
It is, exactly. Like think of it as creating friends. And I know what it's like for introverts, and I hear this all the time. Oh, I can't handle, talking to people or connecting. I don't know how to do it. But, I think we're all kind of shy at this, and it's all scary, but also thrilling. So just start small, start with one person, start with one social media, and just see what you can do. Like there's networking events that you can join between Japan and the US, and you just join these calls, and there's like breakout sessions that you can go to, and you can just say, hello, my name is, and I like this, blah, blah, blah. And that just gets started with something small. And especially when you're dealing with like Japan, I think you'll find so many people are just so friendly and supportive and just kind. So that was at least my experience. I've always felt very welcome, even though I spoke like 2 words in Japanese. So whether you're networking with Japanese people or non-Japanese people, I think it's the same. I think we all want to help each other out. And if you do run into somebody who's an absolute troll or Grinch, then just, you don't have to deal with them. So go to the next person.
Yeah. Awesome. Kasia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been absolutely fascinating talking with you, and I think this is going to be really helpful for a lot of people. So where can people find out more about you and more about what you do if they wanted to look into it more?
They can just go to my website, IkigaiConnections.com. Everything's there, and you can find all my social media handles. But I am most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect, send me a message. And I highly recommend if anybody connects on LinkedIn, you should add a personal message before connecting. So that's my top tip of the day.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.